Good evening, and welcome to the City Council, Norman Utilities Authority, Norman Municipal Authority, and Norman Tax Increment Finance Authority meeting of February 25th, 2025. Madam Clerk, will you please call a roll?
Councilmember Ball is absent. Councilmember Peacock.
Present.
Councilmember Montoya.
Here.
Councilmember Grant.
Here.
Councilmember Nash.
Here.
Councilmember Hinkle.
Here.
Councilmember Holman.
Here.
Councilmember Dixon.
Here.
Mayor Heikkila.
I am here. Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item on the agenda is council announcements, and I'll start with 8.
No announcements from 8.
Councilmember?
Just a couple. First, wanted to thank everybody in Norman who got out and voted a couple weeks ago. It's a big deal, and local elections, as we always see, can be decided by very few votes. And those that show up, I really just appreciate the effort that you made. And just wanted to note one thing, because we get a lot of questions about why our elections are in February. And under the current state law, the only month where we could have our city elections be the same month every year is February. So where we would have runoffs in April, because in every other year we could have our elections in April, but then the runoffs wouldn't be until August or September, which is after when our city charter says new council members have to be sworn in July. So we made that decision a few years ago in Norman when the state law changed. We decided that it was a good idea to make sure that our city elections were the same month every year, and that would be consistent, and you could just count on it, that there'll be city council elections every February, and then every 3 years there'll be a mayoral election. So until state law changes in that regard, that's why we do elections in Norman for city council and mayor in February. The other thing I just wanted to note was there is a grand opening tomorrow. I think it's already open, but since Ward 1 is not here, I'll go ahead and mention it. The Ollie's is opening at 12th and Lindsay. It's already opening, but they're having their grand opening tomorrow at 9 a.m. And it's a former grocery store, the location, that has been vacant for several years now. And I'm really excited because I grew up in this area to see a new business in there that's I already drove by there yesterday and the parking lot was full, and I hadn't seen the parking lot of that strip mall full in a couple of years. So I was excited to see that, and I would encourage everybody to go and check that out when you have a chance. Thank you.
Councilmember?
No announcements for Ward 2. Thank you.
Councilmember?
No announcements, thank you.
Councilmember?
Yes, good evening, Ward 4 and City of Norman. I would like to thank city staff for staying on top of things during the cold snap last week, and to all our social services, both public and private and nonprofit, that help keep people out of the freezing cold. Also, thank you to those who came out to the Norman Development Center on Saturday, February 22nd for the first of the quarterly Ward 4 meetings. We had 25 people attend, many from Ward 4, but a few were from other wards, and that's fine too. If you missed it, I have posted a recap on my Facebook government page and profile. I've archived them in the event, and I've shared them to both the Ward 4 Facebook groups. The second in the quarterly series will take place June 7th in the Norman Development Center. Topics will include AIM Norman overview, which if you watched the meeting beforehand, we were talking about transportation. We'll talk about whatever updates there are to the TIF District Master Plan, council retreat priorities and feedback session, and recap the fiscal year 26 budget updates. Thank you.
Councilmember?
Good evening, Ward 3 in Norman, Oklahoma. Thank you all for taking your time out to vote 2 weeks ago. That's the only thing I have. So for all of you here with us and watching online, thank you for being here.
Councilmember?
Good evening, City of Norman. Tonight on item 3, we're going to have a consideration for the acknowledgement and approval of people to serve new terms or continue terms on our several boards and commissions that the city has. And I want to thank everybody that has taken time to serve on one of these commissions in the past, or is currently serving on one, or is thinking about serving on one. We have several vacancies, and there's probably a commission that is right up your alley for something that you might be interested in. And tonight I want to say thank you to Kay Krister, who has decided that, or not decided, I guess she did decide, but she'll be appointed to the Social and Voluntary Services Commission. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to her for her willingness to serve on that very important commission. So that's all I have. Thank you.
And the only announcement I have is congratulations to Mr. Lawrence McKinney. He was named as the Economic Developer of the Year by the International Economic Development Council, which is their professional council. And so that's a big award for somebody that lives here in Norman, and that's a wonderful thing. Next item on the agenda is the consent docket. This item is placed on the agenda so that the City Council, by unanimous consent, can designate those routine agenda items that they wish to be approved or acknowledged by one motion. If any item proposed does not meet with the approval of all council members, then that item will be heard in regular order. Staff recommends that item 1 through item 11 be placed on the consent docket. I need a motion to place items 1 through 11 on the consent docket.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and second. The motion on the floor is to place items 1 through 11 on the consent docket. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have been cast. Place items 1 through 11 on the consent docket. Passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent docket.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and second. Are there any comments from council regarding any item on the consent docket? Hearing none.
Sorry. All votes have been cast, and the motion to approve the consent docket passes unanimously.
Thank you. Reject the ordinance on second reading, section by section.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion and second. Is there a representative of the applicant to make presentation?
Good evening, Council. My name is Joe Crodell. I'm here representing Western Farmers Electric Cooperative. We're here tonight requesting a special use permit to operate and construct a electric substation off of 72nd Avenue between Etowah and Post Oak. Tonight you'll hear from myself, from Matt Caves at Western Farmers, and Patrick Grace at Oklahoma Electric. Throughout this presentation, the substation itself, you'll see and hear be referred to as the Maxwell substation. That's just the name that it's been given so far. And without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Matt Caves to introduce Western Farmers.
Good evening, Council. My name is Matt Caves. I'm the Vice President of Legal and Regulatory Compliance at Western Farmers. Wanted to go through a presentation and kind of tell you a little bit about Western Farmers for those that may not know. We were established in 1941, longest operating generation and transmission cooperative in the state of Oklahoma. In 1941, we had 9 distribution members come together and form Western Farmers. We're headquartered in Anadarko. We also have an office in Moore off of Telephone Road. You might see it across from Costco behind Life Church. We generate and transmit electricity to about 2/3 the state of Oklahoma. When you talk about geographics, we are owned by member distribution co-ops like Oklahoma Electric Co-op. We generate and transmit the electricity. We're the wholesale provider, and then they take it from the substations to the individual customers. We're responsible for acquiring the land and building of substations to meet the distribution cooperative's needs. We're a not-for-profit. We're a member-owned cooperative. We're guided by 7 cooperative principles. We are owned by 21 rural electric distribution co-ops. We're governed by a board of trustees, each representing their member cooperative. That includes Oklahoma Electric City of Norman, serving the city of Norman and surrounding areas. With that, our members are elected trustees. We set rates. We're democratically controlled. I know there's a lot of discussion about getting out the vote. That's important to co-ops. And members receive capital credits. We don't make profits. We return those margins to the members. Just so you can see our service territory, we have 17 members in Oklahoma and 4 in eastern New Mexico. Like I said before, we were originally formed by 9 distribution co-ops, and we've grown over the years. We've been in existence for about 85 years. Our infrastructure supplies electricity to member cooperatives who distribute that electricity to more than 700,000 Oklahoma customers, including Oklahoma Electric Co-op. The Maxwell Substation is a distribution infrastructure project designated to facilitate and enhance OEC's ability to distribute electricity to its residential and commercial members. The substation location was selected to utilize existing transmission lines and minimize the footprint needed. Currently, Western Farmers owns 7 substations serving Norman. 4 of those are in the Norman city limits, and 3 of those are outside the city limits. We've worked with OEC to develop a community solar garden you see off of I-35 by the York facility, and that began operation in 2017. We also worked with OEC and Norman Public Schools to develop a 2-megawatt solar park near Northeast 60th and Robinson, which became operational in 2021. With that in mind, I'll turn it over to Patrick Grace with Oklahoma Electric Co-op. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening. I'm the only attorney, only non-attorney you'll hear from tonight, so you're welcome. My name is Patrick Grace. I'm the CEO of Oklahoma Electric Cooperative. Now, my background is actually electrical engineering, undergraduate and master's degree in electrical engineering, and an MBA from OU. Norman High grad, so Norman's my home. Happy to represent the members of Oklahoma Electric Cooperative and OEC Fiber. So a few statistics for us, where we are. We serve technically 7 counties, but headquartered in Norman. Cleveland County is our probably most dense county we serve. About 65,000 electric members, and in 2017 we launched OEC Fiber, which was a direct result of a lot of things actually in this area in East Norman, of places that really didn't have broadband. It's kind of left behind in the digital divide. And that was our original mission back in 1937, was to provide the electricity to the rural areas. As you can see here, we serve about 12 to 13,000 members in Norman, and we talk about almost 3,000 in this area, Ward 5. We're really here today to talk about a substation due to our load growth, and I'll show some maps and some numbers here in a second. But over the last 20 years, we've seen a steady, continued load growth, 3 to 5% every year. And we'll talk a little bit about the strains of the electric system, about especially what happened last Tuesday when it got super cold, and really where that places us today. So a couple of things that I really want to hopefully impress upon everyone. At the Planning Commission, there was several questions, legitimate questions that I think I want to clear up. First of all, the fact that Western Farmers is the applicant, does own the substation, but the substation is for OEC. If we didn't need a substation, Western Farmers wouldn't be building a substation. And so this is really a result of the OEC's load growth, and since they are our 100% supplier of both generation, transmission, and substations, it's a response to our request. We work with them to cite where the substation will go. So Matt mentioned this. Western Farmers and OEC have worked together before in the city of Norman. The solar garden that you see on I-35, it's branded OEC because we are the local utility, but that's really a Western Farmers owned site. Same with the Norman Public Schools. Now, the Norman Public Schools owns the site and ground lease to us, and Western Farmers buys all the power from that site and sells it to OEC. So we've done a lot of work before in the city limits. And the other thing that I think, certainly as mentioned at the Planning Commission, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the kind of the big switching substation that's in far west Norman. It's a pretty massive infrastructure, bigger than I think anybody probably anticipated that was there. And I know the Planning Commission probably had a little sticker shock when we came along asking for another substation, as that's the visual image that people see. I want to just kind of point to and show some pictures of the substations we already have in Norman to really impress on everybody that we are not building one of those. That switching station, we have a few of those and they're scattered around, but this is your run-of-the-mill substation that there's a couple dozen in Norman. Like I said, 7 for OEC. OG&E has several, including one right around the corner here. But this is our substation. We call it the West Norman substation. There on 36 and Robinson, and I don't know if my pointer will work, but just north of this, and I can zoom in here, just north of this substation is, what's that? I can use the mouse, okay. Okay, so technology. I don't know, is that it? There? No, okay, well, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. Just north on here on the red box is Pub W. So you've probably seen this substation, passed it by it probably 1,000 times. And here's a closed up version of it. And what I really want to point out, because there's the Maxwell site is set to go, and there is a residence that's fairly close to where this is projected to go. And it's not uncommon for substations to go near residential neighborhoods. Usually it happens the other way around, where we have a substation that's developed around. This is Brookhaven here. As you can see, just to the west or the left as you look at it is a, and I think, yeah, we zoom in. You can see here that those backyards run right up to the fence, and pretty high dollar homes that that go right there. And this is what the substation looks like from the front. So really want to cast this mental image and try to erase the mental image of what's out in far west Norman, because that 40-acre substation switching site or transmission switching site is not what we're talking about. So Planning Commission was very concerned about that, and we didn't have pictures at that time, so I want to show that. The next one is our next substation out on East 24th on Alameda. It's in the back of the housing addition, and you can see here that as you zoom in, and we'll get a close-up view, we actually access this through the cul-de-sac you see there, and you can't really see unless you zoom in here, but those houses are literally probably 10 feet away from the substation fence, and so can certainly coexist with houses. And you can see here, this is what it looks like, and we literally drive to the back of the cul-de-sac and enter that substation through there. So obviously the development was built around the substation, accommodated for it, but most of the time what we have are substations that look like this. This is out west of town, and this is on Roy Oliver's land out where he grazes his buffalo. And so usually in most of Western Farmers, substations are going to be around livestock agriculture areas, because we are a rural electric cooperative, and most of their hundreds of substations are in rural areas like this. So talk a little bit about the Maxwell site, and I know that others will talk about this. You can see here, this is where it's proposed to go. That red line is the existing transmission line. It's built in the 1950s. It actually predates this area being annexed by Norman. And I'll pull up here on this map to see why it's in this spot. So without the pointer, this may be a little bit hard to follow the bouncing ball. But if you look at first of all, the red triangle on the bottom of there is the proposed Maxwell site. The green dotted line that's going east and west from there is the existing transmission line, so that's really where we're trying to place it within that corridor. And the boxes that you see, when it says NOB, that's the Noble Substation. To the east, LAX is the Little X Substation, and then out in pink, and then you go up north to Franklin, and that Liddell is right there in the middle. And so the dots are where we currently have meters within the city limits, and so you can kind of see that, that this is tried to place the substation in between Noble and Little Axe with a slight tint west, because that's where the main growth is going. And these substations were built anywhere from the 1950s to the 1970s. And as you see all these upgrades that we've had, we've really maximized and run out of space in the existing substations. And so much so that when you look here on the loading of this was pre-storm, last week it's called Storm Kingston, I believe, the Winter Storm Kingston. I don't know if that's very appropriate or not. It certainly sounds scarier than the name Kingston, but we blew through all these records last week. So much so that we had crews standing by at a lot of these substations that if it got overloaded, we would have to switch load if we could. In some instances, if the load got too high, we would actually have to turn people off. And we had rolling blackouts in 2021 for Winter Storm Uri. And this storm was not quite that bad, thank goodness, or else I think we would have had people in the dark and turned off heat, as Councilmember Grant, you talked about keeping people warm. Obviously, turning people off in the worst time is the last thing we want to do. And so that, going back to the site, you can kind of see where it is here, and I think this right here shows the good outline of where the transmission line would go. To the south of this, which is to the left on the screen, is where the substation would go, and once again, it's that smaller regular distribution substation. And finally on here, I think my final slide here is just that what the substation is absolutely needed for today, much less the future growth that's already, a lot of stuff's already been platted, so there's growth coming. But with we really have, it seems like, in the past 5 years, the extreme weather has just been picked up at a higher degree, especially in the winter. And so meeting that need, as we've been planning for this, getting this substation is just critical. And without it, it'll really put a strain on reliability and our ability to meet the needs during extreme weather conditions. So now I think I turn back over to Joe. Okay, thank you.
Patrick spoke about it a little bit, but this site was very carefully selected by Western Farmers and OEC. As you saw, it is the proposed site runs along the existing transmission line. It also has great access on 72nd Avenue for that regular maintenance that needs to be done, or in the event of issues, just to be able to get a crew in there quickly. Also along that street are distribution lines. So by locating it in that spot, kind of at the corner of the distribution lines and the existing transmission line, that's all. There's no need for building out any additional lines, acquiring any other rights of way to build these lines from other landowners or neighboring landowners. So this site really does minimize the impact that a substation would have on private landowners and neighbors of where the site is. Also, without having to acquire additional rights of way and build transmission lines and build out this infrastructure that's already there, we're keeping the costs down for Western Farmers, for OEC, but then ultimately for its members and its customers. So there's cost savings and efficiencies that are being maximized at this site. So this site truly was carefully selected. There were other sites that were evaluated. This was just far and away the best because of the intersection of those existing lines and the access. There's been some discussion about the design and the stormwater there were concerns about stormwater. They're going to use a permeable gravel surface like with all other substation sites. This has been an engineered site to handle any stormwater runoff that occurs. As you've seen, there were many other buildings that are very close to these substations. Those did not have detention ponds. We have engineered a detention pond for this site to capture all that, any stormwater that may run off, because there is a little gradient on the site. But any of those sites and the engineering plans will be subject to city and DEQ permitting as this process proceeds. There was also some discussion, and this typically comes up with substations for electrical magnetic field distribution. As you'll see, kind of in the middle, there's a little red dot that shows that is less, it's hard to tell on these screens, but it is not the maximum level. That one spot is the only place in the whole site that has any kind of slightly heightened electrical magnetism that radiates from the substation. As you can see, as you get out, it is near zero. And certainly beyond the site is zero. And this is cited from a study showing that exposure limits of substations of this kind that we're proposing don't exceed any kind of dangerous levels. Western Farmers, if granted this special use permit, anticipates construction of 60 days. They're very, they want to get that going so it could be up online and providing increased reliability within a few months after today. Substations are also generally pretty quiet. The industry standard is 75 decibels, which is the equivalent of a dishwasher, a home dishwasher. So if you can imagine, anybody around it, that would be difficult to hear from far away. And then again, there's been discussion about the electric magnetic fields. There's really been no scientific data that shows any kind of danger from those concerns. But really, just the key takeaways that we want to put forward to you guys and impress on you as to why this is needed is OEC is at its capacity in this area for electric reliability. The last thing, as you heard, they want to do is being put in a situation where you have to shut people down to maintain these substations, because if they run over capacity, then they're at risk of damage, and it can take a while to get a project like this going. So to maintain and to expand, or to keep up with the growth, this site, this substation is really needed for this area of Norman. This location was carefully selected due to the need and due to its efficiencies that create the least impact on landowners and members. This is not a giant high voltage station. This is a standard substation that you can see all around Norman. And really, OEC and Western Farmers, they want to, they take that in mind as to taking the minimal impact that they can. And because they live here and they're community members here, OEC is a big part of Norman, and they want to keep serving its members well. So I believe that's all I have. I'm sure you guys have questions, and we'd be happy to answer them.
I think Matt pushed my button.
Thank you. Thanks. Just wanted to drill down on some of the stormwater issues real quick. I see that you've got a pond or a detention pond that you're proposing on here. What's the outflow condition on that? Is that a pipe out to the street, or is that going to a channel along the road?
We've got an engineer here from Western Farmers that might be better at answering those questions, but I believe, and I might get corrected, that there's an outflow that runs into an existing drainage system that is on 72nd.
Okay.
We'll get the official answer.
I know it's an overly
momentarily.
technical question. Stormwater is a big deal here, so thank you.
Yeah, I'm John McCride. I'm the EHS supervisor at Western Farmers. I'm not an engineer, but I do handle the environmental reviews on these sites. And the way this is going to be constructed is it's going to be an oil water separator. So it will also capture any kind of pollutant. If anything happens to a transformer, we have a little bit of oil come out. It would capture that. So it will discharge out of a metal, basically a metal outflow.
Okay.
So the water goes down and then comes up, and anything else sits on top, whether it's wind-blown litter or anything else. So that's basically how it would work. It would then discharge into the roadside ditch.
Okay. And then the whole site is gravel, from what I understand, right?
So anything that is not gravel will be sod,
Okay.
but there's, with the exception of the small footing for the transformer, there's no concrete really.
Okay, that's where I was going. There's no concrete, so in theory, the whole site is drainable. It should
Yes.
allow water to percolate through the gravel into the
Yes,
into the
absolutely.
soil. Okay, and then I see on the, I guess that's the south side of the plan, it looks to be a drainage channel all along the south side of the property there. Is that going to tie into that same channel along the road, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. Think that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Now it's me. Can we provide some clarity and explain how the ownership structure of the land is currently owned and the process of transferring any deeds from the landowner to Western Farmers or?
Definitely. This is Clint Russell. He represents Western Farmers as well in the condemnation lawsuit that is ongoing for the property. I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, council member. Under the law of the state of Oklahoma, there's what's called the date of taking. And that date of taking in this case is June 12th of 2024. Western Farmers has technically owned the property since that time. And in a condemnation case, how that works is Western Farmers files its petition. The District Court of Cleveland County appointed 3 commissioners. The commissioners went out and inspected the property, met with Mr. Fulkerson and the landowner, myself, representatives of Western Farmers, and they returned what is called a report of commissioners. And that report of commissioners assessed what is called just compensation. It's what they believe the damages arising from the taking are. And under the law of the state of Oklahoma, if Western Farmers wants to take possession of that property and start its project, it must deposit that amount of money with the district court. And Western Farmers did that on June 12 of 2024. And under that same law of the state of Oklahoma, Western Farmers then has the right to start construction of its project. And recognizing that it was in the city limits of the city of Norman, rather than starting its construction project immediately like it would have done if it were in the rural area, it started its process here to get a zoning variance so that it could then move forward. But in the eyes of the law, Western Farmers possesses that property, and it has the right to start construction. All that's left at the courthouse is to wrap up some legal challenges that the landowners have brought. And the landowners don't dispute that Western Farmers, number one, has the right to take the property. And they don't dispute that they're taking it for a public purpose, and that public purpose being an electrical substation. They just simply say that Western Farmers should have put it somewhere else. And under the law of the state of Oklahoma, that's not a prevailing argument, because whether the condemning authority is the city of Norman, Western Farmers, or OEC, that condemning authority gets deference from the court about what property it needs for its project, and that's what will occur in this case.
So essentially, at this point, we're just waiting on a financial decision to be made about what the,
Essentially, and that will be something that the landowner has demanded a jury trial. That will be simply about finances. But in terms of starting construction and having the right to do that, Western Farmers has the right to do that, and has had that right since June 12 of 2024. And like I said, if we did not need a zoning variance, Western Farmers would have already completed its project.
thank you, sir. And I heard Mr. Gray say that this is just, and I don't think this will be for you, but I think what Mr. Gray said about just creating the substation to help alleviate some of the pressure that's on the existing system, I think that is what I understand to be the reason behind the need for this substation. But is there any idea or possibility of like data mega centers, like data processing centers or anything going out there? To me, this size substation doesn't seem like something that would support that kind of infrastructure.
Yes, that is correct. The OEC hit a overall peak of 400 megawatts this past Tuesday. This substation site is an extra 20 megawatts, which is only about 5% increase of what we had, and we were really on the brink of being able to serve that. There are no data centers that are coming anywhere around this that I've heard, and to be honest with you, this substation will have, we'll fill it up with, and if you go back to kind of this map here, sorry, I'm an engineer. This is the maps are. If you look at just north of that red triangle, that'll all start to be served by this substation. And so if we can do it, we'll try to serve it. We'll try to load it up to about 50 or 60% of the substation. That way, if one substation goes down, there's enough capacity to backfeed that. Yeah, no room for data centers on this. In fact, and if a data center would come to us on this, we certainly don't have the substation capacity. We really don't have the generation capacity either, and that's the Western Farmers side of it. The big data center type movement that's being talked about will probably pass OEC by simply because we are in a spot where I'd say we're fortunate because we've had annexed in what used to be rural, and whether it's Moore and South Oklahoma City and Norman have annexed into our area, and so we get some growth compared to some co-ops that are purely super rural. But with that means that we don't have a lot of capacity or land. I mean, it's probably no different than as Norman tries to figure out where to put housing conditions and all that stuff. That's not a problem over in our area in McLean County and Grady County, but here it is, yeah. Did that answer your question?
That does very much. And just for clarity, this isn't affiliated in any way with the north-south portion of the turnpike or none
Correct.
of that?
It has nothing to do with the turnpike at all.
Thank you.
Other than we try to make sure we stay out of its path. If we can figure out where that's at.
So it's not very often that the Planning Commission unanimously rejects something. And so would you maybe go through the concerns that the commissioners had and why they rejected it? And what has changed since then?
Certainly. I think the commissioners questioned as I talked to a few of them afterwards, I'm friends with a few of them. I think the first confusion was just who Western Farmers was. The new big 345,000 transmission line that's coming through Norman that has the big things on I-35, that's built by a company called Nextera, and it's out-of-state company that came in. And so when Western Farmers came into the Planning Commission, the feedback I got was that here was another company that maybe they know who it is, maybe it wasn't. So it wasn't clear that it was actually for OEC or a local company. And so that's why I am presenting today, is so that it's very clear that this is an OEC thing and you can hear directly from me. The other question they had was that does this benefit Norman? And because of as you can see here, most of the stuff is served by the Noble substation. So, there was some concern that, hey, are we building something that's going to benefit other communities and not Norman? And I don't think we really answered that question. I mean, the crux of the Planning Commission is I don't think we gave a very good presentation and really were prepared for all the questions they had. And so I understand their hesitation to approve something, especially given what has just happened with substations in West Norman. So those were two very big concerns. We didn't have pictures. We didn't have a good sense of what that would be. I'm going from memory here. What are some other concerns that they had on anything? They talked about the height of the substation. Once again, knowing the height of the super far west substation, we talked about that, but just as I think now, this is all kind of anecdotal, but the ones I talked to, when I kind of run back through this, I answered most of their questions, and I felt, I didn't ask them if they would have voted yes for it, but I felt like they understood it at that point.
Okay. And they did ask about, the condemnation process.
Yeah.
And, I mean, so what you all are saying is there is no scenario where Mr. Fulkerson keeps his property that he doesn't want to sell it, he doesn't want to part with it for any amount of money, I guess. And you guys went through the legal process to take it. The remaining, as Councilmember Hinkle was saying, the remaining legal wrangling is not about that. Like, this property is going to be your property now. Is that what you're saying?
That's my understanding, but I will defer to the council.
Would just say we would have some apprehension about approving a rezoning for a piece of property that may be almost the possession of someone
Right, okay,
else.
so
Because that could set a strange precedent, I think.
And I can answer that, Councilman Holman. We're getting really down in the, I'm sorry, I can answer that, Councilman Holman. We're getting really down in the weeds of the law on this, but under Oklahoma law, there are only 3 grounds where a landowner can prevail. That's fraud, that the utility committed fraud in acquiring the property, abuse of discretion, it abused its power in taking that property, or oppression, that it utilized its power to do it. And when I say power, that it bullied someone into doing it. And we respectfully agree that, or believe that none of those grounds exist here. Western Farmers made numerous attempts to buy this property beforehand. Through a right-of-way agent, I made numerous attempts myself. And Mr. Fulkerson's client simply exercised its right to decline. They said, we're never going to do this. And therefore, the only way that Western Farmers could acquire this, and this site, as explained, is very, very well suited for this because there's an existing transmission line that has been there since the 50s. It's been upgraded in the latter part of the 99s, and it's adjacent to existing distribution. So there's no need to build out a bunch of infrastructure to get the electricity out to the consumers of OEC. This is why this site was selected. So to get right to your point, that although the landowners have exercised their rights under Oklahoma law to oppose this, we do not believe there's any winning grounds there at all. And they will obviously disagree with there, but they have admitted at the district court that Western Farmers has the power of eminent domain, meaning it has the right to take the property, and that this is for a lawful public purpose, a substation. And those are the 2 winning characteristics. So that means the only thing that is left is how much money. And a jury will get to decide that when the case is ready to do that. But as I indicated earlier, if Western Farmers didn't need a variance, it would have already built this. And that's the simple fact of the matter. But being respectful of the process, knowing that it was within the city limits, it immediately started moving forward with seeking this relief from the city so we could get a variance, so we could move forward with the project. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes. I would also ask, though, what is the process if this council says no?
If this council says no, then obviously I'd have to defer to Mr. Crodel, but it's my understanding that Western Farmers can bring this back. It has several options. It could appeal the decision, I believe, of the council, or it could bring it back up for a vote in a year. But Western Farmers has taken the property under Oklahoma law. It's paid the money that the commissioners assessed to the district court, and it has the right to move forward with its project. So, there are several options that I would allow Mr. Crodel to address, but obviously one of them is an appeal, and the other one is to come back to the council. But that unfortunately leaves OEC in the unenviable position that it might not be able to serve its members when its load gets so great.
Okay, I appreciate that. I did have also a question about notice. Neighbors, were they noticed, an official notice, like any rezoning would be sent out? That's one question. And then,
Do you mean in the condemnation case, sir?
no, just for the action in front of us tonight, which would be typical of any rezoning. People within whatever radius get a notification. And then attempts by OEC to work with those neighbors beforehand. And then there were questions about like elevation, we saw an overhead picture of what it would look like kind of, but what does it look like next to this person's house, et cetera. And so if you might go over those real quick.
Yes, certainly. I guess I'll start at the back end. There's a site plan that the Planning Commission had, and I believe the total elevation change was about 10 feet, give or take a few feet. I'd have to look. I've got it somewhere in here. I gotta look for it. As to OEC working with other, did you ask if OEC tried to make attempts to purchase?
Either entity, yeah.
Western Farmers made multiple attempts to purchase this land. That was through land agents, like with any condemnation case. Typically, what happens is land agents will approach a landowner and say, here's a initial offer, so-and-so is going to, develop this project. Here's our initial offer. That can escalate to where then attorneys get involved, or Western Farmers, for example, gets involved. I was not privy to those negotiations, but Mr. Russell was, and there were at least, I want to say, 8 offers made between either somebody acting on behalf of Western Farmers or Western Farmers themselves to acquire this land, all prior to any condemnation action being filed.
So more so the neighbor to the north attempts to contact that person to say, we're thinking about doing this project next door to you, that type of.
I have not reached out to the neighbor prior to this. I don't believe I'm not sure if Western Farmers, or I don't believe they did either. They weren't trying to acquire their property, so there's, no contact that really needed to be made from their perspective.
And this may be a question for our legal staff, but, like I said, when we have a rezoning, typically the neighboring properties are notified of that beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, is that not the case for a utility, or when they're applying for a rezoning, or? And then they have the opportunity to protest and, so on and on, so.
Jane Hudson, Planning Director. Councilmember, they were notified, just as we do with any of our rezonings. This is a special use. So they had a pre-development meeting, and then they were also notified of the Planning Commission meeting as well.
Would there have been a letter sent out to them?
Yes.
Okay.
And a legal in the paper.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's the questions I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I don't have a whole lot of questions. So the property that's being taken, how much of that is in an easement?
The condemnation is seeking to acquire 2.75 acres in totality, so in fee simple, so no easement.
Well, the existing electric lines that are there, is that not a?
Western Farmers would have that easement already, and so, they can't really take their own easement, I guess, to say. It's within that boundary.
So the majority of it's already in their control. The majority of the property that you're looking at putting the substation is already in your control.
There is an easement across the width of the transmission line across that property, yes.
All right, well, the use, I think you've done a pretty good job communicating that there's the present need for it. The impact, in my opinion, is pretty low. It's not the monstrosity that we're seeing with Nextera and all of that. My only point of apprehension is the fact that the condemnation process hasn't concluded yet. I don't think that we should be getting into the habit of kind of making presumptions about what the outcome of the county court systems are going to decide. You know, in most cases, it's absolutely right. Say if it's a state entity that's taking some property for condemnation, once they get that, once they more or less file the petition and get that initial opinion from the commissioners, they're free to begin their project. They're also taking on the risk that if the unimaginable happens, as however low of a probability it may be, if they decide that it's not a realistic place to do their job, they're responsible for returning that property back to the state that they found it. Our process isn't quite as reversible. If the unimaginable thing happens, and as however low of a probability it may be, if this property isn't ultimately taken by Western Farmers for this project, let's just say they find some infinite source of energy on that property and it's worth $1 billion. That's outside of the scope of Western Farmers. Pretty much a zero probability, but not zero. We shouldn't be taking upon ourselves to assume what the county court system is going to decide. That sets kind of a dangerous precedent. If that's all it takes is for somebody to start filing a petition in the court for taking some property, then they can apply to rezone it or get a special use permit before that process is concluded. Well, then they're going to point back to this situation where we approved a special use for a property that was not yet owned by the entity making the request. And so, yeah, it's almost a sure thing that you're going to have the property, but not yet. And last I checked on OSCN, I think September was the last time, September 2024 was the last time there was movement on that case. So, I mean, it could be imminent. It could be any day. It could be 6 months from now. I don't know how backed up the court systems are. But that's my biggest concern, is that if we start approving these things before the courts have been allowed to do their process and come to their decision, then we're setting a precedent that we really don't want to be setting at a point in time when, with these proposed turnpike projects, the east-west and the south extension, whatever, we're looking at having a very high likelihood of seeing a deluge of condemnation cases that may be similar to this one, may be different. I don't know. But this is the kind of thing that I think as a council we should just back up and say, let the county finish its process before we make our decision on whether the city should approve an irreversible change to the property. And so that I want to move that we postpone this item until that county process, until they've got that concluded.
Motion and a second to postpone, but I'd like to ask a question first, if I may. I guess I've got a different understanding than the council member. Is the land's ownership already settled? And it's the price that is not settled?
Council member, under the law of the state of Oklahoma, specifically a Supreme Court case called ODOT versus Post, Western Farmers has taken the property. It's taken the property that it needs for its project. And it took the property, as I indicated earlier, in June of 2024. And under state law, then it was entitled to start its construction because it had the possessory rights. And that's what Western Farmers has, is possessory rights of the property. The remaining part is a legal process. And it's my understanding, I'm not an expert on the city of Norman's condemnation process, but for all condemning authorities, whether it's a highway, a turnpike, or a transmission line or a pipeline, when the condemning authority takes possession by fulfilling its legal obligations of posting the money for the landowner to claim, it has taken the right to start its project. And that's what entities do. Because if you were to wait for the court system to play out before you were to start a project or to approve a project, unfortunately, nothing would ever get done on time, but because court systems are burdened. There is a lot of, obviously, things that delay projects. But in this instance, Western Farmers has acquired all of the rights that it needs to start this project. And that's why it exercised its right to come to the council to seek this zoning variance, because it had acquired those rights necessary to move forward. So while Mr. Fulkerson's client has the right to a jury trial and it has the right to maintain its legal challenges, Western Farmers also has the right to start construction.
Well, thank you. Please, Mr. Fulkerson, if you would, please.
Excuse me, this is highly unusual.
Well, I think it's
This is our
important.
presentation for the applicant.
Yeah.
I would object.
I'm also the chair, sir.
He's called the motion. The only reason I was doing, I need to dispel the fact that they own the property.
Okay.
That's really critical. So that's the only reason I'm up here.
There you go. All right, well, we have a motion on the floor. And the motion is to, until post. Can I go to, is that a time, finite enough time?
Well, we can't pick a date, we don't know.
Yeah,
So, yeah, that's, I mean, I think that's fine.
okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Since this was rejected by Planning Commission, does it require anything beyond a simple majority to approve it tonight?
Excellent question. I don't know the answer.
No.
Because it was,
No? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm getting you right there. Be to postpone until district court, I guess. Has made its decision. On the case.
If I may, there are two decisions that the district court could make. One is the money, and then the other one that is most relevant to, I believe, your concerns is the exceptions that's been filed. And that would be their arguments that Western Farmers doesn't have the right to take this land specifically. So I would request, if you are, on this motion, if you're going to, request a postponement, that it would be to the second piece that I just mentioned, the exception. That would be to where Councilman Hinkle was discussing is, if it's just up to the money, then it's not, the concerns aren't as serious. So I'm just throwing that out there, that if that is something that you want to add in there to keep the process moving.
Rick?
Technically, there won't be a deed transfer. Technically, after the court makes its ruling, there'll be a journal entry. And then the journal entry is what will be filed with the county clerk to show that the property's been transferred.
And that happens once all these other pieces of the puzzle are
Well,
put together.
Well, this is my understanding of what I've reviewed about this case, and I don't want to step on either party's toes. It is correct, there's a condemnation action been filed, commissioners have been appointed, a commissioners of ward commissioners have made their award, the money has been deposited in court, which gives the condemning authority the ability to take possession and proceed with their project. The landowner has filed exceptions to the commissioner's report, which includes arguments regarding the amount of the commissioner's ward. It also includes an argument with regard to necessity, whether This particular piece of property was necessary to be taken by Western Farmers. The argument, as I understand it, on the necessity issue is you could have put it someplace else. You didn't have to take this particular piece of property. However, there is binding Oklahoma precedent which essentially asserts that the necessity argument doesn't include an argument with regard to where you put it. Because if that were a legal argument that you could use in response to necessity, the landowner could always argue you could put it someplace else. So as stated earlier, in order to establish it wasn't necessary, you have to establish actual fraud, bad faith, or an abuse of discretion. In this particular case, the landowner is arguing abuse of discretion, and the only argument I've seen on the abuse of discretion issue has to do with location. You could have put it someplace else, and again, there's case law that says that's not a necessity argument. Now, I'm not part of this litigation. I'm not doing the discovery. I won't sit here and tell you that I know all the evidence of what the parties could present at trial. What I can tell you is, based on what I've reviewed, if that's the only evidence presented at trial, arguably the court should rule in favor of Western Farmers on the issue of necessity, and then you would have a question with regard to whether or not the commissioner's ward was sufficient with regard to the taking of this particular piece of property. I would also tell you it's difficult from staff's perspective on this issue because we are routinely in the position of we get federal funding for projects. And a lot of times that federal funding requires that the project start by a certain date. We will often try to negotiate with the landowner to get possession of whatever property that we're trying to obtain. But if we can't, we'll have to file a condemnation action to get the process moving so that we can pay the money into court so that we can get access to that property to start the project so that we're able to obtain those fundings from other sources to get the project moving. So it's really difficult. I'm looking at a case here, and I'm thinking about this because we have condemnation actions that have been pending that have never been finalized because we pay the money into court. Once we pay the money into court, the landowner can withdraw it. They can still maintain their right to argue, I'm entitled to more compensation. They can also withdraw the money and still proceed with their jury trial. In this particular case I'm looking at, it's 2012-ish, where actually it's 2002, where we filed a condemnation action. Commissioners were appointed. The money was deposited. The landowner took the money out of court, but never really pressed the jury trial issue. So technically, it's still pending. And that's what, 22 years ago? So it's really difficult for us to try to make those decisions based on what we think the district court is or isn't going to do in terms of its scheduling. Again, everything that I've seen seems to indicate that the process is being complied with. I mean, I suspect it's possible that the district court could rule based on some evidence I'm not aware of that this wasn't a necessity. But even if that were to occur, again, that issue is on Western Farmers in terms of what they choose to go do or not do. And if that decision, if they go spend a bunch of money, ultimately they're going to have to, that will be on them to restore the property, not necessarily you. But it's really difficult for us to try to predict scheduling-wise what the court may or may not do. Again, what's before you now is a request for this special use. I mean, you've got some information with regard to the argument that the parties are making before the district court, and like I said before, I can just tell you what I've looked at. The facts that are presented before the court, what the case law says, and it does seem to indicate that the necessity argument is not that strong.
Okay. So we're all already thinking way too much about this court case, and that's explicitly what we're trying to avoid, is taking the place of the county court system. So the case that's out now is going to have a conclusion, correct? The one that's, that last movement in September?
Yes, it will conclude eventually.
Okay, I want to avoid a 23-year process, but I think it just kind of makes sense with what we have now, what we know now, what the courts are doing now. The case that's out now, when it postponed until it has its decision rendered, does that make sense?
That's what you said, yes, sir.
Okay.
And is there any discussion from council on the motion to postpone? Oh, Councilmember Grant.
I had a question.
Yes.
I wasn't really clear. So if we voted no, you would wait a year or appeal?
Yes, we could appeal your decision to the district court. We could also wait a year to apply again. I believe that is the limit or the minimum amount of time to apply for another special use. And maybe then that would provide some clarity on that would be, hanging up a vote.
Would postponement also work?
The way it's been presented, no, because we need to define what decision we're postponing until. Like I said earlier, there's two decisions, or two rulings, I guess, that are pending. If it's, a final decision, that could be, as Mr. Knighton described, there's, a lot of factors at play that could draw it out for years and years. A decision as to whether the taking was necessary or that piece of it, the first piece, would be a more appropriate time marker for a postponement in our perspective, yes. But ideally, that this would be, in our perspective, ruled on this evening. But that's up to you guys, obviously.
So could we have it for the point 2 on the necessity of the taking? A postponement till then?
I think I can agree with that, because like appeal processes and all that are unpredictable. But the necessity, I think, is a big hurdle for them taking possession.
The reason I said that is because that seems to be your concern, despite Western Farmers, as you've been told, having the authority to proceed with the project at this time, and that they bear the risk of that project, no longer being permitted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Well, and for clarification purposes, is it the district court ruling or is it a final ruling on appeal? Because just because the district court could issue a ruling tomorrow, but that doesn't mean that either side won't appeal. And then the question becomes, ultimately, if the appellate court reverses, you may get a different decision. So I'd want to be careful to make sure as to which decision you're talking about, whether it's just the district court ruling or whether it's a ruling after all appeals have been exhausted, because that's going to make a significant difference with regard to timing.
So for district court ruling, if there are appeals and it gets reversed, it's on Western Farmers to deal with whatever they might have to remove if another court finds it.
That's correct, and
Okay.
and that burden is on them now.
I'm fine with district court.
I think I'm fine with district court, and keep asking me legal questions, and I'll start talking about city attorney pay.
Okay. The motion that I'm understanding that you're trying to make is to postpone until district court has made its decision on possession. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. I just want to get it right. All right. Any further council discussion?
If I may, before, as Mr. Knighton has said, that and we have argued as well, Western Farmers has the right to possess the property now. So I think the language of the postponement or the conditions of the postponement need to be further clarified than that, because it's ambiguous. If you'd like to elaborate.
If I might add, Mr. Hinkle asked the question earlier, or until there's a deed. There's never a deed in a condemnation case. As Mr. Knighton pointed out, there will someday be a journal entry. But that period is a long way off, and we can't forecast it when it will be. But there will never be a deed which transfers title. There will be a journal entry of judgment which says how much the taking was worth. And that is what plays out. So in terms of the possession, the right to possession, Western Farmers has had that for almost a year, and the ability to move the project forward under Oklahoma law. The exceptions won't change that. The possession still exists unless, one of these three factors that your attorney correctly pointed out occurs, which is highly unlikely under binding Oklahoma precedent.
Okay. Any further clarifications? You got it?
Yep.
I think we've got it pretty well.
That's how you want it. All right. It's second degrees. Okay. Motion on the floor. Oh, excuse me.
Oh, Austin.
So I would like to hear what the gentleman in the black coat sitting down has to say. Okay. Well, maybe he'll make a comment.
Now, there will be a time for public comment.
Yep.
It's to be appropriate for him to be able to speak, right?
Yep, it would be. All right, before we take. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on this item. Remarks should be directed to council only. Once public comments have concluded, council may choose to answer your questions. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers?
Since this was a motion on the floor, where they wouldn't have been able to pre-register, so they would just need to come forward. I remind you, your comments coming forward right now is only to the motion to postpone, not the merits of the zoning. So the floor is now open.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Everybody, my name is Sean Fulkerson, and I represent Mr. Horsch, who was the property owner of the land that's being condemned. I appreciate everybody's questions here today. But we have, and I have a copy of here, our exceptions to the commissioner report, which are 3 reasons why the take could be reversed. Those are pending. Those would go to a jury, or a judge would have to decide. So I really feel like the council's on the right path here, is to wait until the take has been justified or approved by the court. That's all I'd have to say on that.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments on the motion?
Rob Norman, Ward 3. I think it was critical that we heard from the actual property owner and their legal counsel here. I think it's a little quirky that we would just be delaying this until a district court decision is made. Is the condemning authority here can push this case along. They don't need to let it sit. They can get this case resolved, and that's kind of in their hands. And I think I'm a little suspicious here. First of all, we have a decision that was unanimously rejected by Planning Commission. Usually that says, hey, go get your ducks back in a row and go back to Planning Commission. I have not known Planning Commission to be anti-development or anti-progress or anything like that. And with all due respect, they have expertise in this area and they study these things. Also, if you're doing it after a district court decision and not appellate decision, what we've heard here from the attorneys is
maybe a little too much at it from Western Electric Farmers Cooperative, a pretty good shake by the city attorney that, okay, it's not likely to go in the property owner's favor, but there may be evidence out there that says it does. And this is an area of law that's changing. And the property owners are absolutely entitled to challenge the necessity of this taking. And our Supreme Court may very well take a very different view of this case, as well maybe the district court. And this may be a case where the district court feels bound by precedent and sends it to the appellate court and says, hey, I feel for you. You got some pretty good arguments. But the appeals courts need to decide whether we're going to maybe do a little departure for the law or whether your situation fits within the law. Let's let them decide that. And really, what this thing needs to do is be postponed until we can send it back to Planning Commission first, or until the legal process is fully and finally decided. I've heard no argument from the electric cooperative that somehow they forfeit their rights if they wait until that process is over. I haven't heard that articulated yet. Maybe they can, and maybe you can let them do that. And then I think Mr. Fulkerson has a right to say, hey, wait a minute, they're not telling you the whole story. That's what I'd say.
Just one other thing I want to add. Right now in the legislature, there is legislation that is going to be filed to curb some of this abusive condemnation. And we're watching that right now. I just wanted the panel to know that and understand that the condemnation law is moving. And of course, the city of Norman knows as much as anybody. Y'all have been down that path. So my client's 91 years old. He's owned this property since 1970. His family uses this property as their family retreat. Mr. King's sitting over there. This room is 100 feet wide. They're going to put this in his front yard. That's what he's going to look at every day. He lives out in an agricultural 2 district. And they're wanting to put this there. These people haven't negotiated with us. You know what they did? They handed us one piece of paper before we went.
We just got to talk about the motion, sir.
I'm getting wound up.
I understand.
But it's an emotional subject. If you can't imagine how I feel, you can imagine how they feel.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. King, were you wanting to come down? Oh, I thought the gentleman behind you was Mr. King. I'm sorry.
I didn't really want to get into a whole session of council, but I was thrown in jail for something that I was not convicted of, and I've been making complaints about corruption in this town. I used to work for the state of Alaska. And
So we're answering one question. Are we? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, the thoughts are that in these process of attorneys, especially this county in particular, who I think some other attorneys have commented, we've outgrown our little court. This letter, I'm not psychic. I know what's in it. There's a bill where I've been found guilty. They're using the U.S. mails to use another bottom feeder collection attorney to extort money. And I study the federal prosecutor's manual. I don't know what's left with federal prosecutors anymore, but they say a place that's most likely to be corrupt is where there is an even political balance.
This is not germane to what we're talking about.
No, but this is your city council office.
Okay.
Sending extortion letters.
Thank you, sir. Now, was there anybody else that had a comment that has to do with the postponement? Yes.
I will speak to the motion. I believe that you... Well, thank you. I will speak to the motion in that I think that the motion is a little flawed in that Western Electric has come up here and essentially pressured you to pick sides in the court case. I think if there are 2 issues before the court needs to decide both of them, and y'all just need to sit back until they're both decided and it's all done. To the merits of the case, I think it's appropriate to point out that until not too long ago, Western Electric was perfectly happy to locate their substation across the street on Stan Ward's land until he told them he wasn't going to have it. And if you knew Stan Ward, the attorney, you knew that was going to be a fight. And so now here they are, and they want to move it across the street. So this talk about how it's the only place the substation can go rings a little disingenuous to me. But I definitely don't think that the council should be picking sides in the court case.
Hi, everybody. Russell, Ward 2. We are not very fond of people taking things without permission. We don't like it as citizens. We don't like being railroaded. We don't like being told what to do. You got to postpone it. You're going to piss off half the people in here. So postpone it, please. Thank you. Have a good day.
Cynthia Rogers, Ward 4. 2 reasons to postpone or actually send it back to the I don't see how you can make a decision given without having additional information to the Planning Commission. If what they presented was deficient and they didn't have answers, let them go back. I think to overrule that kind of a vote from the Planning Commission does a disservice to the knowledgeable people on the commission, and I disagree with them sometimes. I don't know. So I think send it back to the Planning Commission or postpone until the Planning Commission can reevaluate with more information and answers, and maybe the court case will be settled by then.
I'm Mr. King. I live right next door to the property that they're trying to bulldog this man out of. And I've lived there for 30 years. I've seen the amount of water that runs through that property on the other side of my fence. That is a federal protected Thunderbird Lake watershed. There's a sign a quarter of a mile down the street when you're driving towards this property. And that is involved in that piece of property that they're trying to take. It runs through that property from the south and off of the west side down to that corner, crosses underneath 72nd and feeds ponds and rivers that go to Lake Thunderbird. I think this needs to go back to the Planning Commission where it should have been the first time, because that's what they were told to do, was bring back what you have to the Planning Commission, and here we are now in front of you guys. Now, I don't know if I had several things. I don't know if you guys got them. I presented them. Evidence of the watershed, evidence of the water runoff, and the contour of that property is just not a good location for this site.
Thank you, sir.
And it is really extremely close to my house.
Trey Kirby, Ward 5. 2 biggest reasons I think this should just be canceled. For one, they jumped the gun and skipped past things. I mean, when you jump the gun, you kind of need to go back to the start. You know, boomers, we kind of got that from the land run. We jumped the gun. Secondly, they resort to go out there and check out their property. My family has actually ran cattle on that property for 50 or 60 years. So where electricity is a necessity, and they've had other options to put it one way or another, and they chose not to. Food is a necessity too. And the beef that runs on that goes every year to auction, and it goes to our tables. So I would say that electricity don't matter if we can't eat.
My name is Rita Jones. I live at 5250 72nd Avenue, next to Mr. King. About 10 years ago, my husband, who's now deceased, and I bought our 5-acre property. We bought it for the peace and the quiet and the beauty of the land. We didn't buy it to see what they're trying to build. I'm opposed to any condemnation or rezoning which will disturb this reality. I don't want to sit on my patio and see poles and wires and hear noise of construction or operation.
Ma'am, can you speak to the motion that's on the floor, and that's to whether you would ask us to postpone or not postpone, please?
I'm not hearing you, sir. I'm
To
sorry.
get up to the, the motion on the floor that we're talking about is for us to either postpone or not postpone. Would you advise us as to how you would like us to do?
Okay. I would like to see you postpone so you can go back to what the Planning Commission understood was best. You want me to
No, ma'am,
continue?
that's-
Okay, thank you.
J.D. Cromer. I'd like to have a moment of silence for Stan Ward, March 10th. He passed away, but that's very important to me. Stan Ward tried to stop this a long time ago. I've done Stan Ward's land from front to back. I know how much water goes through there, and I just got a high school education, but I'm probably the best dozer operator in Oklahoma, okay? But here's what you do. You have to have common sense. That water has an 8-foot tin horn that goes through Stan Ward's property, and it takes everything to handle that water coming off of Mr. King's place. There's wildlife. Wild care, everybody puts their animals out there for rehabilitation. And I think that we need to really think about this thing, and I appreciate every one of you, and congratulations, Stephen, for the job, Mr. Hackley, for what you've done, and you city council members. We need to stop this.
Any further public comment? Any further public comment? Seeing none, public comment is concluded, closed. All right. Motion on the floor is to postpone until district court has made its decision on this case on possession. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have been cast, and the motion to postpone passes by a vote of 6-2. Voting against, Councilmember Dixon, Councilmember Peacock.
Item number 13, consideration of an ordinance amending sections of the zoning ordinance for RO, Residence Office District, C1, Local Commercial District, TC, Tourist Commercial District, CR, Rural Commercial District, and special uses to establish restrictions on tobacco and e-cigarette retailers. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading, section by section. Do I have thank you. Ashley, would you come up and inform us what we're doing here?
Mayor, if I could, please, I just need correction on my last statement on the motion to postpone. Voting against was Councilmember Hinkle and Councilmember Scott, not Councilmember Peacock.
My apologies.
Good evening, council. I'm actually going to present to you guys on items 13, 14, and 15. I don't know if we need to read all of them at once, but just so you know.
Yeah, that's
Perfect. All right, well, I will proceed. Your favorite ordinance attorney is here back, Ashlyn Wilkerson. Let's get started. There we go. Okay, so just a quick overview, kind of what you see in your staff report with the annotated changes. These changes arose from TSET grant funding that the Parks Department is seeking out. We have done this in previous years, and they have tiered levels, bronze, silver, and gold. We've got everything but that gold level, and that's what we're looking for now. What has held us up in the past is the changes I'm about to propose to you to various smoking ordinances we have, and TSET representatives have reviewed the changes that we have made and have certified that it complies with that gold level funding. And so if they're approved as is, we'll be able to seek that grant funding to do some awesome opportunities. All the changes comply with state law. All the state law that's relevant says essentially we can't regulate more than what state law provides, except if it's our own municipal property. And so that's essentially what we're doing. Most of these updates are just coinciding with updates to state law that we haven't done yet, and then as well having some harsher restrictions on municipal property. As you'll see, kind of the substance there is kind of what I already talked about, is to regulate or prohibit smoking activities or use of tobacco, as well as the smoking or vaping of marijuana on all municipal property. So that essentially means we're going to eliminate some exemptions that exist on the books as is for parking lots in the Westwood Golf Course, and also specifically include municipal vehicles in that designation, and then also pass a new zoning ordinance to impose certain restrictions on tobacco retailers in the hopes of protecting youth. Planning Commission has reviewed the zoning ordinance and forwarded for your consideration, and Parks Board has looked at all of them and has forwarded as well. First is kind of our Section 16, Article 16, Section 5, currently named tobacco, proposed to be changed to smoking in public since it covers more than just tobacco. The changes you'll see in Section 16.501 to the purpose is just a phrasing, kind of identifying that goal and intent to regulate all activities on municipal property. To the definitions, mostly general formatting edits, including specific definitions for terms that are going to be used throughout the ordinance. Tobacco product and vapor product were already in there currently, but just not defined. And then doing clear definition for municipal property. And then this is where you'll see kind of removing some of those exceptions from our public park definition to not exclude parking lots in the Westwood Golf Course. 16.503 is the bulk of those edits where it gets rid of those exemptions, allowing smoking activities in those areas. We removed those and clearly didn't delineate that there can be no activities on municipal property, as well as a kind of change to signage requirements. It's more of a reorganization, kind of clarifying general requirements versus indoor and outdoor and whose responsibility that's on, whether that's a private property owner or us, the city. Enforcement is not major. It's kind of just clarifying who can enforce and what enforcement entails, what the consequences of breaking this ordinance is. And the final sections are just left as reserved. They were previous sections a long time ago, and it's standard practice to just have them be reserved so people can access those former versions. And then the appendix gets updated to reflect the changes in the enforcement and fine penalties to make sure that they are proper. Youth access is mostly kind of formatting and general edits of that nature, making sure it's consistent, numbering. The two substantive changes are just adding nicotine products as well to the already existing tobacco and vapor. That is seen in state law. And then also clearly defining the enforcement officials and processes that is just copied over from state law. And then the new zoning ordinance, this is already a restriction that is in the youth access to tobacco ordinance. We're just putting it in the zoning books because that is what TSET likes to see. So it's a new restriction that you can see the words there, essentially, tobacco or e-cigarette store that's specifically prohibited within 300 feet of any playground, school, or other facility when the facility is being used primarily by persons under 21 years of age. We have included a legal nonconforming use, so for those already existing retailers that are within that 300 feet, this doesn't affect them. It's just any new entities moving forward. And then this zoning ordinance, why it's so lengthy, it also includes this restriction, a reference to it, and all the applicable zoning districts, so people are aware this is a thing. Other than that, I have nothing further for you. If you have questions, Jason Olson's also here if you have questions about what these funds will go to or the grant process. Otherwise,
Questions from council? Hearing none. You must have done a
Appreciate
great
you all.
job. All right. We'll get public speakers. Good. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on this item. Remarks should be directed to council only. Once public comments have concluded, council may choose to answer your questions. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers registered?
We do have some. Gertrude Gonzalez. Okay. Moving on, Trey Kirby. I saw him
just
walk
left.
out. Make sure he didn't come back in. Russell Rice. Wait a minute. Evan Dunn.
Dunn, Ward 7, 1400 Garfield Avenue. I would support these. I would like a little bit of clarification as to the individual vehicle. Did you say that that would not be prohibited? Municipally owned vehicles? Okay. The other thing is about the 21 age restriction. I think it ought to be 25. Nicotine has, proven deleterious effects on neurology, and I think we need to protect our brains.
That's it. All right. Any final comments? The motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on second reading. Council members, you may cast your vote. Well, that was fast.
All votes have been cast, and the motion to adopt the ordinance upon second reading passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on final reading. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have been to adopt the ordinance upon final reading passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. This is item number 14, which we've been presented to on, I don't know, whatever I'm trying to say. Ashland told us what. Consideration of an ordinance adding prohibited activities on municipal property. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Do you need to say any more? No. Any questions from council on this? Has anybody signed up to speak on this?
Russell, did you want to speak on this? Okay, that's it.
That's it. All right. Motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on second reading. Council members, you may cast your votes.
All votes have been cast. The ordinance upon second reading passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on final reading.
So moved.
A motion-
Second.
A motion, 2 seconds. The motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on final reading. Council members, you may cast your votes.
All votes have been cast, and the motion to adopt the ordinance upon final reading passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. Item number 15. Consideration of an ordinance prohibiting the furnishing of and possession of tobacco, nicotine, and vapor products to anyone under the age of 21, prohibiting the display or sale of tobacco, nicotine, or vapor products where self-accessible by anyone under the age of 21, and amending definitions for the purposes thereof. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading, section by section.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Anything more you want to add? Excellent. Any other questions? Hearing none. Anybody else signed up? This is just a chugging
Russell?
engine.
Russell and Evan.
They're good.
I'd also like to add, we ought to do something about alcohol too. If we bump the age on alcohol, we eliminate a lot of self-handicapping.
Thank you, sir. That's all. Motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on second reading. Council members, you may cast your votes.
All votes have been cast, and the motion to adopt the ordinance upon second reading passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll accept a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and second. The motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on final reading. Council members, you may cast your votes.
All votes have been cast, and the motion to adopt the ordinance upon final reading passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. Congratulations. All right, item number 16, consideration of an ordinance adding duties and powers to the Animal Welfare Oversight Commission. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading, section by section.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Ms. Snyder.
I think I'm familiar with these next three items.
Since 2019, I believe we've presented to council about 10 times about these items. So I think everybody's had a great overview, and I'm glad that we're finally where we're at tonight. I'm going to start with item 16, about codifying the Animal Welfare Oversight Committee. That's been something that's needed to be done for quite some time. It was passed by resolution in around 2003. They've been a very active commission, very active board members or commission members, but one of the members has actually served for almost 20 years. They're the only commission or committee that did not have any term limits. All the board members or committee members know that this has been in the works. They understand that they're going to be rotating off, and we've got a system to work that out. But they have really been a great asset to the Animal Welfare Center through the building of the shelter and the bond. And so I'm excited to bring this forward and get it codified and make it a permanent committee on the council. Do you guys have any questions about that? We've set out in the ordinance, the purpose of it, and if you've got any questions.
Are there any questions from council regarding this item? Seeing none, are there any speakers in the audience that would like to comment on this item?
Russell?
All right, are there any final comments from council regarding this item? Seeing none, the motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on second reading. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have to adopt the ordinance upon second reading, passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. We are on second or final? All right. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on final reading.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and second. Motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on final reading. Council members, you may cast your votes.
All votes have been cast, and the motion to adopt the ordinance upon final reading passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. Item 17. Excuse me. Consideration of an ordinance increasing the number of persons for the Board of Adjustment and Norman Election Commission from 5 to 7, amending the Planning Commission membership to require a person from each ward and one at-large person, decreasing the terms for the Board of Appeal from 4 years to 3-year terms, adding oversight over tree protection to the Board of Park Commissioners, thereby repealing the Tree Board and Greenbelt Commission, and increasing the concurring vote required for the Board of Adjustment from 3 to 4 members. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading, section by section.
Motion.
Second.
A motion second. Ms. Snyder.
So one that just in December, and we've gone over them thoroughly. It's after a lot of discussion about boards and commission, this is some of the things they did come up with about increasing the membership numbers, decreasing the Board of Appeals appointments to be 3 years instead of 4. We are, in this ordinance, repealing the tree board and the green belt. Both of those on the tree board, there would be authorization of the Board of Park Commissioners to provide over any matters regarding tree protection, and repealing the Greenbelt Commission.
Thank you. I've seen a lot of discussion about this item, particularly regarding the tree board and the Greenbelt Commission. Can you just clarify that the duties of those boards aren't necessarily going away, that they are just being rolled into the park
Notice
board?
I'm looking at Jane and Jason.
I'm trying to do the same. I think there's just a lot of concern that those functions will cease to exist at any capacity from a board, and I just want to address those concerns.
Thank you, Jane Hudson, Planning Director. Correct. So I know the way it read, I apologize, there was a little bit of confusion, but the Greenbelt Commission will be looped into Parks Board as far as looking at, and I don't want to speak for Jason anyway, but trail possibilities, greenway areas, and stuff like that. So we're not ignoring that. We're not trying to get rid of that by any means because we know we need that. But the Greenbelt Commission has always been, and I can never say this, but recommendatory. I always get an extra D in there. But Parks Board can take, or accept, I shouldn't say take, can accept land, and Greenbelt can't. So, I don't know, we just really felt like this would be a good combination.
No, and I absolutely, I understand the logic behind, yes.
Can I add one more thing before
Yeah.
he takes over?
Yeah.
I just was really excited tonight whenever we did the presentation for the transportation, and they had that map up there, and it was outlining some of the possible trails and stuff that might be coming forward in the future. But I just was really excited when I saw that because it really looped in the whole idea of what we were going to have tonight on the agenda. I agree. Okay, go.
Jason Olson, Director of Parks and Recreation. So, Councilmember Peacock kind of answered your question a little bit in depth from the Park Board of Commissioners side. Yes, we have to have a tree board to keep our Tree City USA. So that will be under the park board and even go as far as I believe when we have our park board meeting, much like you are, the Norman Municipal Authority, Norman Utilities Authority, we'll be announcing at the beginning that all those are categorized underneath the park board because once again, we want to keep our Tree City USA certification. We don't want to lose that for sure. Also, when you talk about the Greenbelt Commission, and right now, Parks and Recreation accepts the maintenance of a lot of things that get recommended by the Greenbelt Commission. So this is helping us probably get a little bit further down the line, understand the maintenance and when these things are coming online so we can adjust our budgets correctly. A lot of times, some of this is getting missed, not getting fully communicated or fully understanding the full scope, because we're not seeing the development, those developments as are presented by the developer. We're seeing parkland developments as it is, and sometimes there's little nuances that are left out, and we're not fully included into that. And as we go through this, have gone through this whole AIM process, one of our top priorities, and it's not just with Park Board or the Park Master Plan, it's every single one of them. Trails is very high on that process, and we kind of see this as a chance to grasp that and take advantage of it, especially through Park Board being able to accept land. Hopefully, we can get through here and change some of our parkland dedication systems through development. That's one of the things is one of the recommendations where we hope that the development we'll figure out and have a full-fledged trail master plan here in the future and update our ordinances where when these developments do come through that we hopefully can accept trail land as parkland as part of the park process and include that fully inside the park system.
Gotcha. No, I think that's a very comprehensive and an excellent answer. I appreciate that. I think, I understand the logic, and just correct me if I'm wrong. The whole intent behind this is to basically streamline the board and commission's process, for civic leader perspective, getting enough people to serve on these boards, but also not duplicating and triplicating staff time, trying to run extra minutes, extra meetings, and all that stuff. So
yeah, there's a lot of duplicity going on. There's some of the stuff that is getting presented by the development community twice. We're also some of the things that are, you have a park board that has park staff manning that. You have planning commission, which has a planning department staffing that, and it's kind of we want to streamline it, and there's a lot of duplication going on, and for sure that if we can get that under one streamline, it'll make our life easier as a staff, and ultimately, save staff or the city times, resources, and like I said, it can make it a lot easier on our side, especially as a park department when we're maintaining this land. Park board is making rules for trails because we do accept that. This makes it a little bit more streamlined, makes a lot of sense when you start talking about it out loud.
No, it makes a lot of sense. From my perspective, I know that the city of Norman's a pretty lean, mean fighting machine, and so, yeah, doing more with the resources we have is always important. I appreciate that. None of that was really spelled out explicitly in the ordinance, so thank you both for taking the time to go in depth with it.
All right, so how are the members of the other two committees being handled? Is this being absorbed into one, the Parks Commission and just the Parks Commission, the current Parks Commission members or the members of that single committee?
So, answer one of the questions you didn't really ask, but there are two boards that are mandated by charter, Planning Commission and a Park Commission. Right now, we have anticipated for this to happen for a few years right now, so we haven't fulfilled all our board positions. We do have a few of them that are also on there, even though that their terms have technically ended. So we have 2 open spots right now. It's completely open, and four spots, and I'm talking about Park Commission, 4 spots that their term has expired, but we have allowed them to continue in spite of that. So when we are talking about combining those boards, technically we have, if I'm doing my math right, what I just said, we have 6 open positions, and we're hoping to grab a few from all those boards and combine them onto the Park Commission.
Okay, because the way it sounded is that Greenbelt and Tree Board being absorbed by the Parks Commission, which then leaves the current Parks Commissioners inexperienced in 2/3, generally speaking, 2/3 of their new objectives. Kind of makes sense to, if it were a 9-member board.
It is a 9-member board.
Greenbelt, okay, so 3
all
from
3 of
Greenbelt,
them
3
are,
from
I
Tree
believe.
Board, and 3 from the existing Park Commission, all combined to 1.
Right now, when we have 6 openings, I think that's somewhat compatible. Yeah, I think it's possible.
Okay. All right, I just need to kind of clarify that in my head. Thank you.
For members of the public to speak on this item, remarks should be directed to council only. Once public comments have concluded, council may choose to answer your questions. Madam Clerk, are any speakers registered?
Marguerite Larson.
Marguerite Larson, Ward 6. I feel very, well, I'm on the Greenbelt Commission. We had no idea any of this was going on. This was all blindsided by us. We had no idea. Nobody bothered to inform us, which makes me wonder how much of us are actually going to be considered on this Parks Commission. I don't think that this was a good idea. I don't think this was really planned well. I don't think you took into consideration the people who have been spending their time, who has their interest, their heart, and their soul in this. As a person on Greenbelt, we have been lied to for the last 6 years by staff. We have been trying to get things changed on the commission to where we actually had influence and power. And for the last 6 years, we have been told it's sitting in legal, which it never was. So I just feel like this is not well planned. I don't think that you took us into consideration. I don't think you took Greenbelt into consideration. And you probably haven't taken into trees into consideration. I understand that you want to streamline. I understand people are working hard. I get it. But I think there's a better way to go about this. I think it should have been more planned, and I think all of us should have been on the table. Thank you.
Cynthia Rogers.
Cynthia Rogers, still Ward 4. I guess I'm a little confused about the math. So 9 members on the Parks Commission, 6 open seats. I just looked, at least if which seems crazy to me. That seems like a problem. So we're going to make a change to give more function to a board that's not even full of people. So hopefully you guys will get that resolved. I don't know how many people are on the Greenbelt Commission. I think the concern is always that folks that are passionate and interested and educated about these want to have input. And I think the concern is that that's going to reduce community-wide input on these sorts of issues. So I don't know how many are on the Greenbelt Commission or on the other that's getting done away with, but I think the goal is always to engage as many people as possible and as many different perspectives as possible, because that's how we come to better community decisions. So again, I don't have time to do the math because I got caught up too quickly to figure this out. But I guess if this happens, and I understand streamlining, and I also understand projects coming forward without the Parks Department knowing what's happening, but there's probably other ways to do this. I'm not necessarily against streamlining, but I am against sort of minimizing or undoing some of the good work that people have done on those commissions. So as much as possible, if those folks can get poured into the empty seats on the Parks Board, I think that would be helpful to get everybody on board. Thank you.
Just for point of clarification, Cynthia, I think this might help a little bit. There's not just 2 people or 3 people currently serving on Parks Board. We just didn't do reappointments because we knew this was in the works for the last few years. So the ones that their terms have expired have still continued to serve until this happens. They only have 2 vacant seats right now. The other 4 have just gotten terms expired. Sorry, you didn't really ask me for that, but Russell Rice.
Russell Rice, Ward 2. I'm up here because of a Facebook comment. I got a phone call telling me that this had been in the works for like 2 or 3 years. And everybody knows about it, but it sounds like everybody doesn't know about it. And if that's the case, it should be postponed until everybody does know about it, until we have a process to fill the empty seats or maybe increase the seats with people from the other ones. Streamlining down to 6 people from how many? I don't know. It seems, without everybody knowing, it just doesn't seem right. I understand that it's been in the work for 3 years, so if it's been in the work for 3 years, why doesn't everybody know? Anyways, I postponed it for a little bit. Let everybody find out. Thank you.
One other point of clarification, there will be 9 members, not 6, on the Parks Board. Next, we have Mayumi Windler.
Hello. Happy New Year. I don't think I've been up here this year yet. Mayumi Windler, Ward 2. Okay, so I'm concerned that there are so many different items on this one ordinance. Adjustments to, the merging of parks, tree, and greenbelt. There's the changes to appeals and to adjustments. Why were these not done in separate ordinances? That's all.
Please. Evan.
Thank you. Okay, so let me clarify this. All of these people on the Greenbelt Commission, on the Parks Board, on the oversight committees, how much do they get paid? Nothing. Nothing. Wow. Okay, so we want to eliminate the educators. We want to eliminate the members of the community who are responsible for affecting the consciousness of this community. Here's an idea. What if we gave all of those volunteer staffs, what if we gave them $100 like council? And maybe the staff who's making more than 6 figures could pony up some of that. I'm offended.
Hearing none, the motion on,
Don't see you, Mark. Wait, it's up to you.
go ahead. Yeah, we'll hear.
So, thank you. I am Mark Nanny. I live at 1815 Lakehurst Drive. I have been the Ward 1 representative on the Greenbelt Committee for some time. My concern tonight about this is the wording in this ordinance. It just says the Greenbelt will be repealed. I know the backstory is that it's going to be melded into Parks and Rec. And I have all confidence in Jason Olson and the Parks and Recs group and their technical expertise. I'm not against the streamlining, but I am worried about the fact that this ordinance says Greenbelt is repealed, period. I know there's a lot of entities out there that don't like the Greenbelt. Developers have to come, they have to present their plans, they get reviewed, they get asked questions, and it is a time for the public through the Greenbelt to review what is being developed in their city of Norman. Remember, people of Norman want trails. They've voted on this, they've surveyed it, positively said surveys on this for over 20 years. My concern is once we say Greenbelt is repealed, then the door is open for anything to happen. Even if we go ahead and say it's parked over in Parks and Rec, when somebody starts getting pinched, they can say, wait a minute, the city of Norman, the city council never said you were officially moved. So I urge you to strike from this ordinance the repealing of the Greenbelt and come back in 2 weeks with another ordinance that clearly states the Greenbelt is specifically moved to Parks and Rec. Its responsibilities are now housed there. Otherwise, we no longer exist, and those who don't want it to exist have accomplished their goal. Thank you.
Okay. Anything from council on that? Floor is to adopt the ordinance on second reading. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have been cast. The ordinance upon second reading passes by a vote of 6-2. Voting against, Councilmember Montoya and Councilmember Nash.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on final reading.
So moved. Second.
A motion and second. Motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on final reading. Council members, you may cast your vote. Oh, not yet. You may cast your vote.
All votes have been cast. The ordinance upon final reading passes by a vote of 6-2. Voting against, Councilmember Montoya and Councilmember Nash.
Thank you, ma'am. Item number 18. Consideration of an ordinance adding definitions for abandoned animal, community cat caregiver, trap, neuter, return, and exotic and native wildlife, updating the language for animal welfare supervisor throughout for consistency, deleting duplicative language related to the TNR program, repealing pet licenses, adding animals venomous to human beings, requiring accreditations for zoos from the Accreditation Association of Zoos and Aquariums or Zoological Association of America, adding a section for community cats, amending the sections on abandonment and confinement of cats and dogs, and amending sections for cruelty to animals and animals that are nuisances. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading, section by section.
Motion.
Second. Motion and second. Recognize Ms. Snyder.
Well, thank you, Mayor. You did a great summary there. I don't really have much to add to that. This was brought, these amendments and changes were brought forth by The animal shelter staff, Kelly Robertson, the shelter manager, is here if you have any further questions on it. They've just gone through it and updated it to make, as you read through, instead of saying dogs or cat, it's any animals. About abandonment, we wanted to strengthen and mirror the state law on cruelty to animals to add willfully. Pet licenses will be repealed. Microchipping is much more effective in registering pets. I think it's the goal of all the animal staff is all the staff in the field have things. Can't think of what to call it. And so the goal is when they come across an animal and they can scan them for microchipping, they prefer to get the animals back to their home before they ever make it to the shelter, and that's been very effective. Pet licensing is just not the most effective or efficient way anymore. We wanted to beef up the exotic animals. Yeah, you'd be surprised how many times we know that there's a monkey somewhere or a zebra. And with that, if you have any questions, I can try to answer them, but Kelly would be much better at it if you have any specific questions.
Questions from council? Seeing none. It's an opportunity for members of the public to speak on this item. Remarks should be directed to council only. Once public comments have concluded, council may choose to answer your questions. Madam Clerk, are any speakers registered for this item?
Cynthia Rogers. Russell Rice. Evan. Okay. Okay, that's all.
Anything else from council? Seeing none. The motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on second reading. Council members, you may cast your vote.
And the motion to adopt the ordinance upon second reading passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on final reading.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and second. Motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on final reading. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All vote to adopt the ordinance upon final reading passes unanimously.
Item number 19. Thank you, Jenny. Item number 19, consideration of an ordinance rezoning property located at 428 Buchanan Avenue from CCBFC, Center City Form-Based Code District, Urban General Frontage, to CCPUD, Center City Planned Unit Development District. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading, section by section.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Have a motion and second. Is there a representative of the applicant to make a presentation?
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. I'm here this evening. My name is Peter Petromelli. I'm with CSO Development at 102 West Eufaula Street. Let's see if I can get this. We're looking to rezone 428 Buchanan from urban general frontage in the CCFBC to a CCPUD. The subject tract is located here on the map. It's just north of White Street. Zooming in on the site just a little bit, it shows that we are located just north of Othello's. North of us and to the west of us is also multi-unit residential, and to our east is a city parking lot that's open, well, it's paid for parking. A couple of the things that we're doing on this site is we are providing streetscape improvements, sidewalks, tree canopy, most of what we would normally see in just a standard orange area of the FBC. But what is unique about this site is we do not have alley access like most of the lots in City Center. And we also have a 42-foot right-of-way instead of the standard 60 or 80. And really the reason that we're here, the majority of our requests are in response to these two changes in the standard lot. And so right now, we're asking for no changes in the facility. It's a 4-story structure, which is what you'd typically see in the orange area. We have 2 and 3 bedroom units. We're required to have a minimum of 3 units. We have more than that. We have 10, one of which is a personal residence, 9 or 4 lease, 6 3-bed units, and 3 2-bed units. None of the uses have changed for residential, and none of the uses have changed for our commerce, except we have removed self-storage and vehicle repair, so we're not asking for any variances there. Where we start asking for variances is where we see the lack of alley access. And so most of these are related to fire and egress-related changes. And so since we do not have back access to a right-of-way, we have no choice but to not build from property line to property line so we can egress people from the back side of the building. And so what we've done is ask for 75% frontage instead of the 100% frontage. And this allows us to egress people on both sides of our building from our back stairs. We've also asked to remove our setbacks on the front of the building from 2 feet to 7 feet. What this allows is, and actually 3 or 4 different items are related to this with the 42-foot right-of-way, our aerial access for fire. So if they bring a ladder truck, they have to have so much space between the building and where that ladder truck is parked. And so at the current 2-foot setback, we would not meet those aerial access requirements from a fire truck. And so what that does is, what we've done is basically move the building as close as we can to the property line without impeding into that fire lane, the aerial fire lane. And so it does require us to move the building back 5 feet from what we originally are allowed. That also impacts the awning requirements that we would have, because if we pull the building any further back to create or to meet the standard awning requirements, we would be actually requesting to move the building further off the property line. So we're kind of in this weird area where to keep the building as close as we can, we'd have to make our awning just a little bit smaller than what we would like. But we feel that it fits this property probably better than moving it back even further. If I move back just a couple slides, you can see that our building actually aligns with Othello's covered awning in their back, well as it's just on the very north side of the street. There's a multifamily project, and so all of these buildings that are on Buchanan Street on this west side will actually align, and we won't have this weird toothed effect like we're getting in other areas where buildings are built over time. It actually is in line with the legacy projects on that street. Let's see. So we're adjusting, as we move the building back from the front property line, we've asked to adjust the building from the back property line. And one of the unique things that we're doing here is we aren't creating any new surface parking. And so we are required to have 24 parking spaces. We're utilizing existing parking that is not currently being used and have a lease with an adjacent landowner for that parking. We're asking, and this is a weird thing, we're asking for only 2 bike racks instead of 3, partly because we provide 2 interior bike spaces under our stair, and partly because a lot of our tenants don't use the bike. They only use them during the day if they don't keep their bikes out at night. So they're usually visitor parking spaces or visitor bike spaces, and it's only because they've gotten stolen in the past. So we encourage them to leave their bikes indoors. The last 2 things that we have on there, the second to last one is a big thing to me. It's not something that we're currently using on the project, but I'd like to keep it in here for future uses. Exposed fastener metal panel. One of the buildings that is a great representation of utilizing this is the well. Almost every piece of their exterior material is an exposed fastener metal panel. I'm against it not being allowed in the form-based code, but I understand why, because once you start allowing those, you get into an R-style panel that's more of a barn-style panel. And so we would exclude that, but allow exposed fastener metal panel if in the future that's something like that was wanting to be used. And then one last thing that we'd like to do is increase our sign size from a 2-foot sign to be able to utilize a 3-foot sign and allow it to be further up on our building. We have a couple of larger buildings in the area, and we'd like to just be able to make sure that we can see, from our frontage, we can see kind of what the building's branded as. That's really everything. As we go through this is what we're proposing the front of the building look like. 3 stories that are very traditional with a small top private residence that's a little bit more, contemporary, utilizing brick, cedar columns, painted steel or aluminum handrail, and fibrous cement siding. So all approved materials in the original CC FBC. I have floor plan, site plan on here and our elevation that just shows that we are only utilizing 2 and 3 bedroom units. And that's everything we have here tonight.
All right. Questions from council? Yes, sir.
One of the main ones just is, this is a residence currently, or has been, an old house. And Othello's has live music outside on their patio.
Yes.
Anything about the building that addresses that, where we don't have residents that are complaining about a business that was there first?
Not that I'm terribly aware of. As a matter of fact, I'm just representing the owner, but he was very specific in wanting we have a centralized courtyard that faces Othello's, and we feel that that's a feature. Then the adjacency to the commercial spaces that are actually going to be a feature to the tenants of this building.
And it'll be removing a current driveway, right?
Yes, it will remove a current driveway. So we are actually removing some surface parking.
Okay. That's all the questions I had, so.
You gonna put a pizza pass-through in the
We
division?
might have to, or at least a gate in the fence between the 2 places, so yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
As you mentioned, there's no alley. Could you explain how sanitation will operate?
Yes, so we just started working with sanitation, but there are 3 existing dumpsters along on Buchanan Street, and we're proposing to utilize the existing dumpsters there.
All right, and then I read where the area is pretty flat. Can you expound on stormwater and how that will be handled?
Yes, so we typically put in rainwater collection on all of our projects, and we will do a similar version on this where we will collect the rainwater or downspouts from around the building, make sure it gets to the street so that it does not impact our neighbors.
And then what is kind of the intent? I know where you get to in the end might not be where you wanted to start, markets change, but, you have commercial and residential.
Yes, our goal on this is really true mixed use. Our first floor will be built to commercial standards, just similar to what the Orange already requires. And we would really like to see that first floor turn into commercial space in the future and help support, Campus Corner. But in the meantime, we want to make sure that we're kind of a stable project. And right now, I feel like we need to have residential on the first floor.
And then I noticed in the list of residential uses, you have household living on all floors. It could be elderly housing, short-term rentals, group living on all floors, assisted living, boarding house, rooming house, lodging house, hospice, dormitory, fraternity, sorority, monastery, convent, nursing home, transitional home. So you could easily say that this isn't just intended to be student housing.
Absolutely.
It's
Yes.
open to many options.
It is very open to many options, and we purposefully left these in here. These are all the uses that are allowed in the current CCFBC, and we left them in here to ensure that in the future, as demographics change, we have the opportunity to change with them.
All right, those are all my questions.
All right, thank you.
All right, this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on this item. Remarks should be directed to council only. Once public comments have concluded, council may choose to answer your questions. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers registered for this item?
Evan Dunn?
I'll pass.
Okay. That's it.
That was it? Oh. Any final comments from council? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch base on a really positive point of the project. Obviously, Center City was originally designed as a park once or park never kind of mentality, and so I just want to give the applicant kudos for being able to park the project completely off-site. 24 spaces off-site is a pretty large feat to be able to pull off, and so I'm really glad that you're able to do it, and I think that's a great lesson and a great example for other projects in this area.
Just one more question about, and I do appreciate that too. I think this is exactly what we're trying to get towards here. There is some large trees on the Othello side of the fence, and I noticed one of them, at least in the last updated picture, hangs over a little bit. I'm sure you'll be using care with that.
We're actually planning to protect that tree, and we will prune it up and make sure that it can coexist with our building, but, yeah, that's important to us too.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on second reading. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have been cast. The ordinance upon second reading passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on final reading.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and second. Motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on final reading. Council members, you may cast your vote.
And the motion passes by a vote of 7-1, or not 7-1, excuse me, 7-0, with Councilmember Hinkle outside the chambers.
Oh, I would have timed it different. Item number 20, consideration of an ordinance granting special use for a church, temple, or other place of worship with a waiver to exterior appearance in R1 Single Family Dwelling District for property located at 1501 24th Northeast. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading, section by section.
Motion.
Motion to adopt. Second.
A motion second. Is there a representative here?
Good evening. My name is Libby Smith on behalf of the applicant. With me, I have Tony Bragg, the architect, Herschel Thompson with the applicant, and I believe there are some members of the congregation here that have made it through the meeting in support as well. Let's see. This is a request by Wildwood Community Church to update their special use on the property. The church is currently existing on 24th Ave Northeast and East Robinson Street. The current zoning is R1 with an approved special use permit for a church. Like a PUD, this special use permit is tied to a site plan, and so this is really just a site plan amendment for the church. You can see also that on 3 sides, while I have the screen up, it is surrounded by the Wildwood greenbelt, and so that won't be touched, that's still gonna remain. Here is the aerial, which we're kind of using as the existing site plan. The church building you can see there, and then is surrounded by parking lot. This is the existing street view. You can see the church kind of set off from the main street, and then in the way distance, the green belt surrounding that. Here is the proposed new site plan. The church is proposing a 12,000 square foot student center and gym. It will go on top of some of that existing parking and stay bordered by that green belt. So it's kind of behind the existing church to that southeast. This is kind of a zoomed out view of the site plan showing the whole campus. That parking lot, which is to the north, more on the left side of your screen, is off-site, but the church uses that for its existing parking. This is a preliminary rendering of what the new building will look like. As part of the request, the church is requesting a variance from the 80% masonry requirement. Since it's set so far back off the road and bordered by that green belt, you won't really be able to see it, and they would rather use some of that money for the interior that really serves the students instead of masonry that no one will really see. So just a summary of request. This is basically just a site plan amendment for the new gymnasium and student center. The current zoning of R1 with a special use permit for church will remain the same. There haven't been any protests, and this item received unanimous recommendation of approval at Planning Commission. And so with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions from council? Yes, sir.
By that existing parking lot off-site, that's not part of this request tonight.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
The spot where this new building is going is already covered in impervious surface, right? It's already
Correct.
part
Yep.
of the parking lot.
It's going right on top of the parking lot.
So you're not adding anything, any
Correct.
new concrete?
Right. And the drainage is kind of that southeast, and that's already sufficient to serve all the pervious as it is.
And do you know what was this originally?
What do you mean?
Before it was Wildwood Church?
Oh, it's currently Wildwood Church,
Yeah.
so I don't know
I wasn't sure if you knew
historically.
the history of that building or how it ended up there. So. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? All right. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on this item. Remarks should be directed to council only. Once public comments have concluded, council may choose to answer your questions. Madam Clerk, are there anybody registered for this item?
Marguerite Larson.
Marguerite Larson, Ward 6. So I have a question, because I live close to that area. So right off of 24th, where Wildwood is now, there's a sign for another church right there on the corner of 24th and Robinson. So is this in addition to that? Or is this in replacement?
Council only,
of that?
please, Marguerite. Questions to council only, please.
Oh, sorry. Okay, guys. Is it in addition or is it in replacement of that current sign of a different church that's not associated with Wildwood?
Two different animals,
There are two different,
two different churches, to the best of my knowledge.
so if they're two different, then I'm confused as to where the expansion of Wildwood is actually going to be taken. Is it, because the green space is on, since I don't know my directions, if I'm going down 24th, the green space is on my left, Wildwood is on my right.
Okay, you're going south.
Coming off of Robinson if I'm heading down 24th. So I am wondering where this addition is actually going to be taking place.
Between the church and the Greenbelt.
So it's behind the church, where the parking lot is now. So the new parking lot that they just built, they're going to build an addition behind the new parking lot they just built, which backs up to the green space. So what kind of impact is this going to have on the green space?
On the what?
On the green space.
Oh.
What kind of impact is it going to have on the animals and everything else that's coming over there?
It shouldn't have any, to my knowledge.
Okay. That's all.
Evan Dunn.
Wow. Okay. I want to be very careful with the words that I say here because I'm sure a lot of them will anger a lot of people. If this institution is advocating for mystical, magical explanations and if we're educating young people to have a dissonance about the atomic theory and its reality and scriptural ideas, scriptural explanations, then to allow this to go forth would be to incentivize that pollution in young human beings' minds. That goes for every theological place of worship. If you deny the power of the atomic theory, your ideas and your sacred texts are causing a division in your congregation. The fundamentalist interpretations of Scripture have got to be redefined. Or else, what are we trying to do as a society? Oh, I'm sure these are all dedicated, disciplined people who live their lives according to a code. And I appreciate that, and I respect that. However, the inculcation, the indoctrination that creates a dissonance in the mind of these young Americans, I think we should repeal any tax incentives for theological institutions. We should charge them we should put a tax on them if they're teaching that type of reasoning.
Anybody else? All right. Any-
All votes have been cast and the motion to adopt the ordinance upon second reading passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on final reading.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and second. Motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on final reading. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have been cast and the motion to adopt the ordinance upon final reading passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, next item on the agenda is miscellaneous comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address City Council. Due to Open Meeting Act regulations, council is not able to participate in discussion during miscellaneous comments. Remarks should be directed to council as a whole and limited to 3 minutes or less. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up?
Yes, Mayor. Rob Norman.
I think I stayed first, mostly to congratulate Jason Olson and Parks and Recreation on the agenda item about the adaptive sports and recreation baseball. As an old optimist, an old person involved with USA softball, I think that was great. And that just needs some cheerleading, and that was long overdue, and it looks like you guys had to do some things to meet their grant requirements, and you did them, so fantastic. I think the other thing I wanted to mention was getting back to this issue of condemnation versus what city does and city action with giving out special use permits and the timing of that. Probably more and more, and you're going to see more and more of this, you got a little flavor of it tonight. You're going to see more and more what I would say is plausible and viable challenges to the necessity of takings. That's going to get you guys going both ways. You're going to find it happening to you, and you're going to have people up here like tonight mentioning that, hey, wait a minute, we don't necessarily concede that they can take this property. And it's a little revolutionary concept, although I think it's a concept that's far past due, that just because you're statutorily authorized to take property and just because you articulate a good reason for doing it, that doesn't mean that you necessarily get to do it. I think it's going to be a sea change in the law. Right now, there's legislation that's got to get through some bottlenecks that are going to reform eminent domain law. You heard a little bit of that from Mr. Fulkerson. There are people in this room that will be going up to the legislature tomorrow to try to get some of those bills through some bottlenecks in the legislature. And the legislature is looking a lot more property rights oriented these days and a lot more rank and file property owner oriented these days. And don't be surprised if a lot of that doesn't go through, and don't be surprised if our Supreme Court doesn't tighten up those notions of necessity and public purpose real soon. I don't know if this is the right case that came before you tonight where they'll do that, but they might. So I think it was a good thing that you wait on this case to play itself out before you make any decision to give any special use permit. And perhaps for the people to use that in the court case as some sort of, see, the city council thinks we should be able to do this, and then all of a sudden a judge is going, what do I do about that? I think you did the right thing there tonight. Thank you.
Marguerite Larson.
Almost done, guys, almost done, ready to go home. I just wanted to give a big shout out to Helen Grant for the work that she did, getting the city behind her, taking care of our unhoused friends, to make sure they didn't freeze and they had food. So kudos, thank you.
Cynthia Rogers.
Almost quitting time. Still Ward 4. I want to congratulate everybody who won the recent election and also thank everybody who ran, because I believe in community service and I know it's a thankless job. Also, public service announcement, there is an election next Tuesday, if that's March 4th, for Moore Norman Tech Center has a $90 million bond issue on the election. So for Cleveland County, South Oklahoma City, Moore, Norman, can vote on that. So I encourage people to sort of look up what it's about on Friday at 6:30 at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church. We're going to have a town hall about that. Okay, I don't know what the beeping was. So if anybody wants to come and ask questions, also we'll talk about the referendum petition going forward from there. And then my bestie couldn't be here because he caught the RSV. And but he would, I'm sure, he would want to make a comment about what is fair compensation for somebody's property. You know, it's like, what would I sell my kid for? What would I sell my property for? And I think it probably is worthwhile us thinking about the market price. I mean, if somebody doesn't want to sell their property, it's their value and it's how they evaluate that. But we have a system set up that sort of forces market evaluations on people when they could have different values beyond what market value is worth. So I hope that, you know, maybe the laws of the land will change to acknowledge that, particularly for projects that really could be located at other places. Thank you. Have a good night.
Richard Baxter.
My name is Baxter, founder of nonprofit organization Racism Stinks. We believe that cultural and community collaborations will improve race relations. Our motto is real, not woke. Of course, you know the skunk is our logo. It's black as white as stinky. Usually this would be a time when I would have a skunk joke, but I don't. I got something a little interesting to talk about, but so did you guys hear about the Olympic athlete who adopted 3 kids? Mark, Seth, and Anya. And so there was a fire one day, right? And he yelled, "Anya, Mark, grab Seth and go. We got a couple of laughs. Almost got Michael. But he appreciated that setup. But seriously now, I want to turn your attention to, we were talking a lot about law earlier. So I want to turn your attention to Oklahoma Community Statute 1-1, and that is love and unity. And yes, I did just invent that, but it does sound like something we need, right? Okay, now, come on now, stay with me. So since you guys all agreed, in observance of this now agreed upon statute, we're hosting the Norman Cultural Unity Parade. It's going to be May 3rd. Everybody's invited. People come here to air out grievances and to try to see how you guys can put things together. I think we need to come together for a time to celebrate one another and understand that public safety is the number one issue that everybody can agree on, no matter what culture you're from, no matter what disagreements you may have. And we have to support the efforts of our law enforcement in actually, rebuilding trust in the communities. And so that's what this Cultural Unity Parade is about. And any assistance you guys have, any connections you guys have that you want to lend to the furtherance of this is much appreciated. Special thanks to Mayor Larry Heikkila. He's been a big supporter the whole time. And Deputy Chief Ricky Jackson of the Norman Police Department. Thank you, guys.
Did Russell leave? Dan Munson.
Hi, I'm Dan Munson from Ward 6. So the end of January, we had a proclamation and Dr. Henderson came in and talked to us, and I thought that was spectacular. And it's resonated with me. And what he said about this should be a city of love, this should be a city of acceptance, and this should be a city of respect. That really resonated with me. And one of the things that I believe we should consider for our next major art project for a Norman Forward project is to consider that theme. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I would like to honor Dr. Henderson with a nice art project. Switching gears, sales tax collection is down by 1%. If we include inflation, we're down 5%. So inflation last year was 4%. Being down 5% is not good. What that means is we need to think about what cuts we're going to have to make. And then we also have to look at ways for increasing revenue. I'm going to talk about transit again. I am not anti-transit, I promise you guys. But one way that I believe that we can increase revenue is by putting in fare systems in the fixed bus route. So only large buses, not cutaways, not paratransit, just the fixed route. I believe the cost on that will not be too bad, and that's where the majority of our riders come from. So I believe we can increase revenue that way. Another way that we can increase revenue is asking OU to increase their contribution to $250,000 annually for the rideshare program. Another way we can increase revenue is asking for $5 per ride instead of $2 per ride. If OU doesn't agree to contributing $250,000, I think we should cancel that rideshare program. It would save our city a lot of money. A small way to save some money is to stop funding new bike racks. If you drive down Main Street Main Street, I ask you to count how many bicycles you see in bike racks. It is hardly ever. They're cool looking, but I think that's a way we can trim back. I'm out of time. Take care.
That's it. All right. That being the last speaker.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Evan, you are, you're on the back page. Keep me honest.
Seven, announcements. The farmer's market is going to be happening again Saturday, 9 to 1. I got this from China not too long ago. And there's 2 magnets in here. And oh, dang. I should have tested this before I came up here. Anyways, this copper is going between this magnetic field. It's invisible, right? Magnets are still incredible to me. And the way in which you can take this magnetic field and you can generate electricity, it makes me think about gravity. It's invisible. The atmosphere, it's invisible. Our digestive system, the way that our organs operate, it's all invisible. You know, this is very common in China. These types of methods by which they can educate young people about the phenomena of the atomic theory, the phenomena of electromagnetism. I think, who else has a terminal illness? Who else has lived in China? Who else has dedicated some amount of their life to understanding how and what's going on in the heart of our greatest economic and military rival? Who else has designed a system for optimizing the human structure and all of human functionality? Pay me $1 and I will be a Norman envoy. I will go community to community. I will draw on that story. For 13 years, I've been dealing with that terminal illness. Do you think I have some answers? Do you think that I can make some connections for young people to inspire them to live healthier lives that are more connected? I do.
Well, counsel?
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Paul Arcaroli. That was on a back.
Ward 3, also known as sycophant, left-wing, left job, sayer of no, and most recently, mob boss. My uncles would be proud of that one. I have all these Italians in my family, Terranovas and the Immediates, and they would like to know that I actually got into the business, but I didn't really come here to talk about the press release that was related to that, actually. I just really came to actually thank Brenda Hall for the work that her office, and she went through counting all of those signatures and verifying them. That was a Herculean task, and I really, the whole mob really appreciates what you've done. And I really wanted to thank you for opening up your office to me when I had to come back and verify a couple of thousand sheets, and you were very gracious, and I appreciated it, and you deserve much more recognition than I can give you here, but I want to say thank you. Well, I was going to talk about the town hall on Friday, but Cynthia did it, and, oh, that's all right, don't worry. Anyway, but it is on Friday, 6:30. It's at St. Thomas, what is it? What church are we in? Which church is it? Oh. Saint, on Brook Street, and we'll be there. We'll talk about the appeal, and we'll also talk about the bond issue. And looking forward to seeing you guys after the appeal. Thanks so much.
Well, I'd like to thank the mayor for a good job that he done. And the mayor that's coming in after a year of your job, he might need a mental illness check. But we're gonna, I came in to talk about something else, but I'm a little bit worried about my electric bill going up, and I'm sure that'll affect the gas prices at Walmart, so. But it goes off and on a couple, 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes at night, sometimes in the day. And I'm sure that I love this council right here, because before that Midwest City stole my home from me. It took me like 10 years to pay that thing off, and they stole it in 10 days. So I appreciate y'all's integrity on stuff, because I don't think anybody deserves that. When you steal something from somebody, that you steal it from their kids and their grandkids and anybody else that's connected with them. So this morning, I'm sure this is a city of love, because I got an alert to go over at Food and Shelter, because this girl was naked laying on the ground and guys was having sex with her, and I told my friend, you video it, send it to me. But his wife was with him, and I'm pretty sure he won't drive down that street again. So the weather is changing. I've already heard that bikes are being stolen. I asked my ward representative to bring it before this council to take responsibility for those guys. If you're gonna feed them, then when they steal something or tear something up, then you be a man and fix it and replace it. I don't think we deserve that. 20 years ago, it wasn't like that. And since this city's growing, we're gonna have more of it. Who's gonna take responsibility for it? I'm pretty sure everybody knows that I'm responsible with my house, especially if it's wrong or bad. If it's good, then somebody else can take responsibility for it. I'm happy about that. But is anybody else on this council gonna be responsible enough to, I don't know how you do that, put it before this council, take a vote on it and say, okay, if they steal it or tear it up, call the police chief, he'll come over and see the city manager, get the money and replace it and fix it. Does that sound like common sense? And my friend back here, I'm a little bit worried about him, because I had to talk to these kids at OU, and their theory on lizard people about blew my mind. And I don't believe I came from a monkey, so lizard people don't mean nothing to me. And then I had to ask that kid, what's he gonna do with that dumbass degree when he gets out? Because that was pretty shocking. I appreciate you guys.
Mayumi Windler. My apologies to everyone. I skipped a whole page. Sorry.
Hello, Mayumi Windler, Ward 2. Something I noticed earlier today, the third stall in the women's restroom, the purse hook is actually hung upside down. I checked all the other ones and they're good, but in the third one, it's upside down.
In this bathroom?
Yeah, yeah. So that was just weird, random thing. I saw on Facebook earlier today that the interstate princess dog was finally caught and is in the shelter. And so that is like really super amazing, because she's been out there for months and months. And I know a lot of people were really worried about her with, all the cold weather recently. So I'm glad that she was finally caught. Yeah, I think that's it.
I think Debbie Burleson left. Trey, you weren't in here when I called your name earlier. Do you still want to speak?
For this? Yes, I will back here.
Okay.
Trey Kirby, Ward 5. I'm just going to touch base on the electrical thing real quick again that we were talking about earlier, because I believe in the due process once again and how we should take the full due process and not skipping certain parts of it or trying to get around it. They have fibbed multiple times, and if we're not going to stop it, then can we do like Jim Shaw and Mr. Jett, J.J. Humphrey and all them, and maybe put in an ordinance to where we set it to where they can't be built within a half a mile of somebody's front door? Because I know for a fact that they did have multiple offers to be able to buy, and one, it wasn't convenient for OEC or OG&E, and one, it wasn't convenient for them on something else, but they did have other options, and that's where they can fail in court, is they did say no to people who offered them to buy that for like $57,000. So if you would put in kind of like they did with windmills and solar and everything else, to where if you are going to put in a substation like that in an existing area where houses already exist, and how about we keep it like a half a mile off their front porch? Then they won't even try, and it saves a whole lot of headache and stress, because that old man, we've known him for 50 years. My whole life I've known that man, and he's at the end of his life, and the last year, it's been nothing but stress on if his family will be able to keep the property that he paid off and is their legacy. Secondly, I want to talk about the Moore Norman Votech. That expansion for $90 million is expensive, but it's very, very necessary. As a farmer, the AI and everything that would come with it would help drone technology and everything to, check fences, check cows. As an electrician, both my nephews are trying to become electricians. One's having to drive all the way to Ada. There's not a local school that has enough spots. They turn away too many people. My son and my other nephew is having to do it in the field training because there's not enough spots at the Votech for him to learn. Every week I turn down jobs for $44 an hour. I stand in here and hear about homeless people and not being able to afford rent. We have people making $7.25 an hour that could go take a 2-year course and walk out making $20 to $25 an hour. Within 2 years after that, be making $44 an hour. That's how you end homelessness. That's how you make rent affordable. We can't change the housing cost per se. We're going to try, but it's going to be a lot harder than just making it to where by 2030, we never, ever have to turn away another student. Right now, we turn away almost 1,900. Thank you.